Hello everyone, this is a Notifier AM2020 fire alarm control panel. These were first produced in 1987, and throughout most of the 1990s, these were the flagship panel for Notifier. The AM2020 was an addressable panel, and by the end of its lifespan, these panels could support up to 1,980 addressable points and supported a wide array of other features, such as voice evacuation and networking. Now there's a lot to talk about with the AM2020, so we'll start off with a quick demonstration. For initiating devices, we have an MBG12 pole station, a Blue Point pole station, and a System Sensor 1451 ionization smoke detector. The notification appliance is a Wheelock E70 speaker strobe with the alert lettering. Because for this AM2020, we have both fire and non-fire voice evacuation. So the pole station and the smoke detector will trigger the fire evac message, while the police pole station will activate the non-fire message. Also, this is a LCD80 TM annunciator right here. So let's just hit it.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? A fire has been reported in the building. A fire has been reported in the building. Please proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building. Do not use the elevator, but proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building.
Alright, so we have audible silence. And you may have noticed that did take a minute to alarm. The AM2020s are pretty infamous for being fairly slow panels. We should give it a break. These are very old for addressable panels, and they're also quite large and complex. So yeah, now we can re-alarm with the smoke detector. Now this is ionization, so it might take a minute.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? A fire has been reported in the building. A fire has been reported in the building. Please proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building. Do not use the elevator, but proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building.
Alright, there we go. So we'll reset the pole station and air out the smoke detector, and then we can reset. Okay, hopefully that's aired out. Reset from here too. Nice little light show. So a lot of moving parts on this panel, which is why I started off in the demonstration first, because there's a lot to talk about. Alright, before we do that though, let's do the non-fire message.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? An alarm has been activated in the building. Please proceed to the stairways and exit the building. Do not use the elevators. May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? An alarm has been activated in the building. Please proceed to the stairways and exit the building. Do not use the elevators.
All right, there we go. I have a strobe flash for this too. All right, and we're now back to normal. All right, so the AM2020 is quite the complex panel. And on real systems, this wouldn't be the only cabinet. There will be transponders and probably second cabinets holding additional cards and stuff. But this 2020 isn't a single cabinet and everything's compacted together for demonstration purposes. So we'll start at the top here. This display board is called the DIA, Display Interface Assembly. This is a DIA 2020, and this just contains the LCD screen, buttons, and keypad. The AM2020 is fully programmable from the keypad, though I will say it is a bit clunky. I believe there was a software for this panel. It may have not been for programming, it could have been just for downloading the job, but I heard that it's quite a doozy. This is a really old panel, so old panel stuff does apply here. Now, the displays didn't always look like this. This is the original looking display. It says AM2020 right on the door there. And this is, I believe, called the DIA2. And this is what the original 2020s used. I would have used this display, but unfortunately, the firmware on this display is so ancient that it doesn't work on the newer systems. Its circuit board and its EEPROMs and everything are all different. But I did try to get this powered up before. It does power on, and it seems to somewhat work, but it gives a ton of troubles and doesn't really want to cooperate. These panels are very finicky, so if something doesn't work, it's going to give you a really, really hard time. But we'll get more into that in a little bit. So yeah, maybe one day we'll get this working. But for now, we're just sticking with the display that is more common and probably what anyone who's seen one of these is probably familiar with. So you can open this up and take a look at the back side. This is what the back looks like. It's just the back. That's what the original firmware chip on this. I did modify this a bit, and I'll explain a little bit. And here's the inside label, DIA2020, AM2020. There's a terminal block here, and it can be used for two things. You can either connect an LCD80 Annunciator, like that one, to the display, and it will work for that Annunciator. Or you can use a printer and connect it to that display too. So the display is a bit interesting. It's not like typical file displays where it just pretty much just displays whatever the CPU says. On this panel, not only does it show the status and controls, it also stores the panel's labels for all the points and everything like that. Therefore, if you happen to switch out displays and you don't do a clean swap out, you're going to get a lot of troubles and whatnot because you're switching out part of the system's programming. It's kind of strange, and that's also why there's a display trouble indicator, because this panel is an integral part of the main system. Quick side note too, the trouble and security alarm are under the same LED. Older displays like this did not have security alarm marked on there. In fact, there was a kit you can get so you can replace that label to say what it says right there. But this is a newer-ish display. It's like, it says right there, 1999, so yeah, this is a newer style display. So here's what the inside looks like. This is the top bay, and this is pretty much where all the main components are, and they all ribbon cable to the display. So this card right here, this is the main CPU. This is the heart of the AM2020 system. It stores configuration options like all the points and such, and also contains the operating firmware. You see the firmware chip stands right there. Now, this isn't exactly a 2020. It's been modified, as I said. This is actually an AFP1010 chip, not an AM2020 chip. But the only difference between the AFP1010 and the AM2020 is that the AFP1010 just has less points on it. So while the AM2020 could do 1,980 points, the AFP1010 could do only 792. Besides that point difference and slightly different circuit boards, they are almost identically the same and can share the same cards. So a genuine AFP1010 CPU doesn't look as busy. There's less of these storage banks and such. And the display has its own firmware too. But yeah, other than that, they're roughly interchangeable. So that right there, that's a reset switch. You preferably don't want to have to press that if you don't have to. This goes to the main power supply, and then that one just goes to the DIA display. And there's no terminal connections on the CPU besides a block there. It just has a single alarm and trouble relay contact, and that's it. So yeah. Now this card back there with the yellow LED on, this is a CCM1 converter module. And that connects to this card right here. This is a serial interface board, or a SIB. And there's several different types of SIB cards. This is a SIB-NET card. And what the SIB cards do is to provide a connection for any kind of remote serial components. So this is an RS-485 terminal for Annunciators, like these down here. There's also an RS-232 terminal block for connection to PC, CRT terminal, or printers. And so the CCM1 module takes the RS-232 output from the SIB card and converts it to RS-485 for Annunciators, like the LCD80 down there. It also has a RS-232 output for printers. So it pretty much does what the DIA display does. It just repeats it. Since you can only have one of the other options on the DIA, you'll need this card if you want to use the second option. Just got this card just for variety's sake. But there's all sorts of cards you could put on the AM2020. Not to mention, this is an ICA4L interconnect chassis assembly. And this is where all these cards mount onto. Yeah, and that connects to the power supply as well. So this is a SIB-NET card. And the net part is because of this. This is a media interface board, or MIB. And this card is used if you're going to connect the AM2020 to a network, Notifier net. I've actually demonstrated this before. I networked the 2020 to an AFP200 and AFP400 in a little 3-node network. And this is the card that you would use. There's one other network card you can use. It's called the AM2020. But using that card on the AM2020, it's more limited. So if you want full networking capability on this panel, get a SIB-NET with a MIB card on it. There's other SIB cards too. The SIB-2048 is pretty much the same card, just no slot for networking. There was also a SIB-N2, which looks quite different. And I believe these were more common on the Johnson's Controls rebrand of this panel, which was the IFC 2020. Most AM2020 and AFP1010 systems would have a CPU and a SIB card, as well as one of these cards that's sitting back there, sitting back here. This is a loop interface board, or a lib card. This is a lib 400. It has 2 SLC loops, one here and one down there. And the lib 400 can hold up to 396 points across 2 loops. The AM2020 runs System Sensor's CLIP protocol, which has up to 99 detectors and 99 modules per SLC loop. There is also a lib 200A, which is the same as the lib 400 except it only has 1 SLC loop. And there's also a lib 200, which was the original loop card that only has 1 loop and is a bit older. The lib 200A and 400 have some improved transient protection and some other improvements over the original lib 200. So the AM2020, with its 1,980 point capacity, can handle up to 10 SLC loops. So if you had all lib 400s, you would have 5 of those cards, and you'll probably have to expand into the second bay. And you can mix and match lib 200 and lib 400s because of the numbering system on this panel, which is we'll get into that more if we take a look at programming. So yeah, that was the top bay, and it's pretty much the main brains of the system. Everything else below this is mostly optional, and we'll get to that. So lock that up, and then we can take a look at the rest of this panel. Okay, next bay. We just got an array of Annunciators here. This is a ACM16AT, and this Annunciator can be used on all sorts of Notifier panels, nearly all Notifier panels up until very recently. So this is a very flexible Annunciator. It can be used for anything, and it can be programmed for a variety of applications. And then each of these cards here are expander cards. These are AEM16s, and these all have to be linked back to the main card, which is right here. And you can see it flashing green there. That just means it's pulling from the SIB card. Now, the reason why this annunciator is here is because it's a necessary component for the voice evacuation components, which are located behind here. So here's what the back of the annunciators looks like, and they all connect with this ribbon cable. And there's just a spare blank plate back there. So there's all your connections there. That's your annunciator connection and 24-volt power. And this wire is going out to the LCD80 that's on the table. So this right here, this is the voice bay, at least on this one. So the component responsible for the tones and the voice messages is this audio message generator here, the AMG1. So the AMG1 is just a component that can be added to a lot of larger notifier systems that provides tones and voice messages on the fire alarm system. And these can be used on other panels like the AFP300, the 400, the FC600, the first generation Onyx panels like the NFS640 and the NFS3030. And these can also be used on the newer Onyx panels like the NFS320, 2640, and the 23030. Although the second gen Onyx panels are not designed to support this, you have to kind of make your own harness for it. And the AMG is quite flexible since it just connects to the main panel as an annunciator. So the AM2020 CPU just sees the AMG as an annunciator, and that's also how it supervises it. So the online LED indicates it's communicating with the host panel, and the terminals are up there. There's your power harness. There's another connector up there. And then the top right connector over there is your output that goes to your amplifiers, which we'll get into. So you get a microphone right here. It's kind of blocked by a bunch of wires, which is why I didn't take it out. You get an on-call switch and then a local speaker volume. This is always nice. It's turned all the way down, but you turn it up. Nothing's playing on it right now, but if you listen very carefully, it's just playing the supervisory tone. Turn that back down. Alright, so a basic AMG1 only contains tones. If you want voice messages, you have to add some additional chips to the board. So you'll see underneath this dress plate there's a couple of additional chips. That's just a basic firmware chip on the left. Everything else are voice chips. So right there is they're called VROM chips. These are factory pre-recorded messages. And there are over 100 of these you can add to any system. And there are some very interesting ones too. There's one VROM chip that just contains silence and nothing else. You have some that contain just a chime tone or some slow loop tone, no voice at all. And then you have more normal ones that you may have seen and heard in some videos before. So this VROM here is VROM 122. This is the fire message. And in the back there, which can't be seen, but there's also VROM 120, and that was the non-fire message. There are also some special unique messages like a tornado message, a flood message. There was even one for power outages. When the first gen Onyx panels were released in the early 2000s, they added a few more VROMs to the library. And it was really only up to like VROM 200, and the number starts at 101. By the end of the AMG's lifespan, they had up to, I believe, VROM 230 something. And then, in addition to 2 VROM chips, you can also have 2 VRAM chips, which are also voice chips, except these can be recorded in the field for a variety of custom messages. And these VRAMs can be recorded to either using a microphone, or there's a audio input jack there in that hole there, so you can use a cassette tape or some other input to record a message to them. And these chips don't hold too much. I believe they can only have up to like 23 seconds of audio. But if you have a short and concise message, that's less of a problem. Now underneath the microphone there, you can see some dip switches, and that programs the annunciator. So on the AM2020, the AMG actually programs a bit differently than, say, an AFP400. It uses a different annunciator address, and there's also a lot more complexity involved. This is why the aforementioned annunciator is needed, because this annunciator is pretty much used to control the voice messages on the system. So you have the fire message, general evac, which we heard before, and there's also the VRAM messages down here. But yeah, that's the AMG1. And that's what was making all that noise before on the speaker strobe. So amplifiers. The AM2020 and the AFP panels at the time period used these analog amplifiers, the AA series. This is an AA30 amplifier. It outputs 30 watts of speaker power at 25 VRMS. So this red connector here connects to AMG. If you're connecting, say, to another cabinet, then you'll have to use the terminal block up top and wire that to the input on the amplifier. once you take the input from the AMG, it amplifies it, and then the output will go to either the speaker control modules, or in this case, the transponder, which we'll get into very shortly. So yeah, this is a smaller amplifier, and it fits right next to the AMG, which is why it's mounted like this. In a typical AM2020 system, you usually would have, say, the AMG, and then either an AMG-E, which is a expander AMG without the microphone, or an FFT7 firefighter's telephone, especially in much larger buildings where you'll have fire phones. And then you'll generally have a full-size amplifier in other bays in the system. So the full-size amplifiers included the AA120, which had 120 watts of power at 25 RMS, and there was the AA100, which had 100 watts of power at 70 RMS. And both the larger amplifiers had backup tones. This one does not. But that's not a big deal. Pretty much it for the voice bay. With the points here, we can control the AMG's messages here, and there's also dip switches to set what types of tones to play and what messages to play as well. That's the voice bay. Now we can take a look at the next bay down below, which is the XP transponder. Alright, so next bay down, we have the XP transponder. And this one is right inside the panel, although as a transponder, these will usually be located remotely in other parts of the building. So all the transponder is really is a fire alarm subsystem that communicates back to a master panel like the AM2020, and it acts as its own little system with a variety of inputs and outputs depending on how it needs to be configured. So an XP transponder takes up an entire row on a cabinet, and it can have up to 24 points, 26 if you include the 2 relays on the main CPU card. And all these points show up as modules on the main host panel. So you just got your power harnesses here. It's powered by the main power supply. And then it connects to the SLC back up to the host panel like the AM2020 is. So the first card, and all transponders had this, is the XPP1. This is pretty much the main CPU for the transponder. It has 2 relays on top, an alarm and a triple relay. And it monitors each of the cards and also communicates to a panel. These transponders can also act as standalone fire alarm systems, and it can also function on their own if the main CPU decides to fail or it loses communication. I should go back to this. Many parts on the AM2020 and a lot of notifier panels for that matter have backups. So the lib card that was behind the SIB card there, if the CPU decides to fail, because that can happen with these panels, the adjustable loop will continue to run even if the CPU is out. So it provides a backup functionality in case of a CPU failure, which can happen. And especially for a life safety system like this, that's fairly important. So back to transponder. So there's a couple of dip switches here. This is your programming options. You get some operator modes. There's a chip here. This may not be the correct chip, but there's certain chips you could put on the XPP1 to do some special I/O mapping. Gives us a bit more detailed programming on it. But other than that, when it's connected to a main panel, everything here is controlled by the panel. There's a couple other options too, like alarm verification, the piezo, relays, and supervision of other stuff like that, depending on the configuration. It's got a little button here. It's a lamp test. It also is used to silence and reset the system when it's standalone. Yeah, so your ribbon cables, and it goes to all the cards out here. So this card here, this is an XPM8 module. This is 8 monitor points. In Class A configuration, it has 4. And this just provides a bunch of initiating points. And these are what are connected to all those devices out there. So yeah, this system used all conventional devices, but that's fine. You just connect to this transponder. There is also an XPM8L module, which is pretty much the same module, except it's always Class B. So this module is Class A by default, but if you cut the resistors there, make all those circuits Class B. So yeah, there's 8 monitor points on this card. This card right here, this is an XPR8 module. This is 8 relays. These are just dry contact relays. They could be configured for a variety of different things, and there's also various switches here to control what relays trigger for what events and stuff like that. But I just have it so that each of these relays is its own independent relay. Yeah, and the reason why there's a bunch of wires here, I kind of made this panel to be like a demonstration panel, so you can just press a switch, it'll activate that zone, sound everything without having to worry about external devices. But yeah, actually here we can demonstrate that right now. Let's play a message just for fun. In 2020 and all of its slow glory. So yeah, just real quick, and everything will clear up in time. By the way, the LCD ADTM, the LCD backlight extinguishes whenever there's a trouble on the system. So yeah, it does that. So there it goes. So yeah, so all these LEDs just indicate if there's something on or an alarm. It's pretty straightforward. So this card over here is the XPC8 control module. These are 8 signal circuits. And these signal circuits can be configured for either just regular filtered DC, for horns, strobes, that type of stuff, or for audio. So for this one, half of the circuits are just regular DC, and the other half are audio. And that's how we have that speaker strobe working. And there's a couple of jumpers that could be cut there, and resistors that can be cut, and they'll make this signal circuit, this whole signal card, a 2-stage system. So if you want a 2-stage signaling, you can do that. We have voice evac though, so we left that alone. So yeah, that's pretty much the entire transponder, and multiple transponders can be added to a system. You're really only constrained by the amount of points these take up. And then on the very bottom is just the main power supply. This is the MPS24A. I guess I can take this off if I can. That's better. So anyway, MPS24A, the System 5000 and the SensorScan 2000 also use this same power supply. It's an older power supply, though this one is a bit newer. It's got some power here. That's powering all sorts of stuff, the Annunciators, the signal card. So yeah, this power supply is definitely carrying a lot of weight on the system, but it does a job just fine. And then these connectors go to the CPU bay and the AMG and all that stuff. And then just some batteries. And this panel is in a black Cab 4 counter, which is normally meant for the NFS Onyx panels, but yeah, these would traditionally be in a dark gray Cab 3, but this works just fine. So that's pretty much it for the Notifier AM2020. These are really, really cool panels. And while they are very nice and have a ton of features, they are not the easiest to set up and maintain. Had a lot of fun trying to get this back to normal because it was sitting in storage for a few months. But yeah, it's normal now, and hopefully it stays that way for when I network this with the rest of the Notifier panels I have. So the AM2020 would be discontinued in the early 2000s with the release of the NFS 3030, which would carry on the flagship for the Notifier brand. But these panels are still fairly common nowadays. They are usually seen in much larger buildings. I've heard that some places like Chicago still have a lot of AM2020s in service, so there's a good chance you may still see some of these out in the field, although these are, as I've heard, dropping like flies, and parts for these tend to fail after a while. I actually had the SIP card on this panel actually failed a few months back, and I had to get a new one, but parts for these aren't too expensive, at least for the most part. Yeah, if you are interested in getting an AM2020 or an FP1010, you're better off just building your own instead of trying to find a complete one online, because these are very big panels, and trying to ship a giant panel is usually never a good idea. So if you do wish to have one of these, you're going to probably want to put one together. So as I mentioned before, parts for these aren't horribly expensive, but they are a little less common to find, especially for cheap. Probably the most expensive parts for building a 2020 will be the DIA, the MPS24 power supply, Yeah, it's really it. It's just the DIA and the power supply, and I'm forgetting what else. Oh, the AMG and the amplifiers tend to be fairly expensive as well, but that's optional. These can run as normal horn strobe systems if you really wanted them to. And the transponders, they're not too expensive, but they are less common to find. And really the worst part with these panels is just getting all the harnesses just to power up everything. So if you ever get one, just make sure you don't forget those harnesses. And while they are slow and fairly old, and parts on these tend to fall apart, especially nowadays, the AM2020 is definitely one of the coolest panels made by Notifier, and I guess for good reason, and it's why they're still relatively common nowadays. So that's pretty much it for this panel. Not a lot to talk about. But yeah, this is really a nice panel. Now, if you have any questions about the AM2020 or the AP1010, or maybe how to even program one of these, just feel free to answer below. I'm also on several social media platforms if you want to talk there. So yeah, this has been the Notifier AM2020. Until next time, have a nice day.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? A tornado warning has been issued for this area. A tornado warning has been issued for this area. Stay away from windows and glass. Do not use the elevators. Please listen for further instructions.